Okay, so that was episode 1 on toxins that you saw yesterday. As Suzanne Humphrey said in that episode, we can't do much about what's in the air, what's in the sky, but we can do a lot about what goes into our mouths. So episode 2, we're going to focus on nutrition. Now let me remind you, what we're trying to do is draw you with us on a journey towards all of us getting healthier. So nutrition is the starting point for this. Timmy.
You know what? So one of the things that has fascinated me is nutrition over time. In doing research for some of the documentary series that I've worked on, I've learned just some fascinating things about the level of, say, sugar intake compared to even at the turn of the century and then compared to what's in our food now. And I'm talking about added sugars and things like that. Nutrition is an interesting conundrum for many people. The obesity rates, especially in the United States of America, have risen dramatically. And I mean, we're talking about elementary school students who are clinically obese. And now that I've lived in Costa Rica for a while, when I go back to the United States, I see it. And I can see the pain and the frustration on people's faces. And there are a lot of varying ideas about what constitutes good nutrition. In my personal journey, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, I've tried a number of different methods over the course of time. Some of them seem, counterintuitive to themselves, but it all comes down to what you put in, what quality of the ingredients, nutrients that you're getting, and believe it or not, what supplementation you need. And in this day and time, believe it or not, that's a thing. We're not getting as many nutrients out of the actual food that we're eating as we used to. And those are some interesting statistics. This episode is going to be very eye-opening for everyone. And we're going to definitely touch on some very different methodologies and some very different ideas. So keep an open mind throughout and see what resonates with you in this episode in your own life. Because what we're really trying to lead you towards is the idea that you can take change and make change in your life. And we're trying to give you as many different possibilities to find the right fit. So pay close attention to this episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it.
I think one of the crucial things that Timmy said there is we've got to be open-minded, because I've worked on a lot of these series, as you have.
Yep.
And the thing is, as soon as you mention one type of eating, everyone who's in another camp literally turns off.
That's right. That's right.
So we've got to try and find a middle ground, because like you explained in your interview, there are so many ways to do this.
It's true. It's true. And some of them seem diametrically opposed to one another, but genetically, as human beings, no matter how much alike we are all still very different. And it comes down to finding the right combination of things that work in your life to be sustainable for the long term. That's really it.
Absolutely. And remember too, we will cover all this more in the Accelerator program at the end of the series, okay? It's important to remember that. But with that being said, episode 2, nutrition.
I used to think "you are what you eat" was a corny catchphrase. But the more I delve into the world of nutrition and the hope of a long, healthy life, the more I realise how true that is. Making this series, I've interviewed more than 40 experts. Each of them has his or her own particular emphasis. But there's one thing they all agree on. The healthiest diet, and the one that best sets us up for a happy 100, is a plant-based diet. 80% of our food should be plant-based and ideally organic. And the starting point, if we're serious about our health, we have to take responsibility for ourselves and begin making changes.
Something has become normalized that is actually killing us. Slowly, but insidiously and predictably. When somebody dies of heart disease or cancer or diabetes, that's listed as the cause of death. But the truth is, it's not. It's a symptom. The cause of death is a diet and lifestyle out of which those symptoms, those diseases, became almost inevitable. If you don't get one of them, you're going to get another. But if you wanted to design a diet that was engineered specifically to facilitate heart disease and cancer and diabetes, you'd have a hard time doing better than what we eat as standard American norms today. I mean, we are eating a diet that is so low in fiber, that is so high in added processed junk. You know, most people, their main carbs are white flour and white sugar, right? And then their main fats are bottled oils and factory farmed animal products. And you know, when you look at a situation like that, no wonder we're sick. No wonder our kids are suffering from diabetes and obesity. And the tragic thing is a lot of people think it's their fault. And they feel ashamed and embarrassed that they're suffering. And they don't realize that there's something they can do about it.
Everybody knows they should exercise. You can't be alive in this age without knowing that. Everybody knows junk food is named that for a reason. Everybody knows that they should eat less sugar. If you've been to a dentist even twice in your life since you were 5, you heard your dentist say that. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that it makes sense to take a good multivitamin. Doctors have been saying this for 80, 90 years, and they're reliably telling us that it's nutritional insurance.
When we shift our mindset from what's easy and most pleasing to what's going to give me the best strength, energy, and vitality, we start making different decisions. We start looking at food and water differently, and we start looking for things and noticing reactions that our body has when we're consuming foods.
Using nutrients, you know, to help keep the body, you know, in an anti-inflammatory state, using the diet, you know, like we were talking about, you know, eating an anti-inflammatory diet, all of that takes stress off the body. And so, I mean, I think if at any point in history, now is the time where we are going to be able to live longer and longer.
We need to get a lot more fiber. And if we move to vegetables and a diverse range of vegetables as our primary source of carbohydrate, and they have, you know, primarily complex carbohydrates, we reduce the total energy intake substantially. And of course, for many of us, that's an important, particularly people who are prone to putting on weight, consuming fewer calories in the right form is pretty key to the process. But it's also important to not rely on processed foods. So this means a shift much more to home preparation of foods.
I was having dinner with some friends, and I'm not a lot of friends that I know that you know who they are, and we're all in the health space together. And we were talking about how if we go out to dinner, how the scale will budge up a pound or 2 even. And even if we're going and making good choices, going to a farm-to-table restaurant, but we gain weight eating out and we don't at home. So what's that about? Well, first of all, I think it's an inflammatory reaction. And second of all, and where's the inflammatory stuff coming from? They're not choosing every single ingredient the way that we would. So when I use an oil, I am using the best quality oil I can possibly find. I store them correctly. I use Himalayan pink salt. I use freshly cracked pepper. I use every single one of my ingredients is all procured, picked out personally by me, and is the best level of whatever I can get. They don't do that in restaurants.
Under my recommendations around this daily dozen list of foods I encourage people to include ideally in their daily diet. So I talk about people should be eating the healthiest vegetables, which are dark green leafy vegetables, particularly cruciferous vegetables, the cabbage family vegetables like kale, collards, broccoli. The healthiest fruits, which are berries every day, beans every day. Encourage people, you know, to a quarter teaspoon of ground turmeric every day, a tablespoon of ground flax seeds, the best beverages, the best sweeteners. So I just kind of go through the list in hopes of kind of, you know, pushing people in the direction, inspiring people to eat healthier. And there's a free app for iPhone and Android, and just encourage people to, I mean, look, when I'm traveling in some airport food court, I'm not able to get through half the list, right? But look, when I'm home, have control of my diet, I really do try to pack in as many healthful foods as possible. And then naturally, it kind of excludes some of the less healthy options, right? If I got to eat another serving of vegetables today, well, it's just I have less room to fit in the, you know, the tantalizing junk food at the end of the day.
Everything until roughly 1890, 1900 was organic, so they didn't need a special name. There were no herbicides, there were no pesticides, there was not the food processing, except if you were King Henry VIII. And did you know that King Henry VIII paid for an ounce of sugar more than an ounce of gold was worth at that time? Because sugar processing was just started. No wonder the man got so fat, you know? Yeah. So all that has to go. If it isn't in its natural state and unprocessed and unrefined with no sugar and chemicals added, don't eat it. Makes it a little difficult, but that's a first step.
You know, so our grandparents, great-grandparents, they got up, they went and they worked the field. They milked the cows, milked the goats, got the eggs from the chickens, worked, you know, planted their garden, you know, picked tomatoes, picked okra. They're working all day long, you know. If they were going to get a meal, they were going to have to go get the meal from their property. They didn't go down to the grocery store to buy it, right? So they were literally working all the time. So they're out, they were getting good sunshine, they were getting good vitamin D, which is cancer preventive. They were getting exercise, they were moving, and they were eating real food. And they had to work for it. Today, we've been so spoiled that, I mean, we look at it as an inconvenience if we have to go hop in our air-conditioned car and drive 5 minutes to the grocery store to get something that we forgot on the last trip. We're like, I can't believe this. This is so inconvenient. You know, we're so spoiled, right? And so when people that are that spoiled begin to look at, well, in order to be healthy, I've got to stop eating my Twinkies and my Snickers bars and whatever else. I've got to actually start exercising each day. I need to move. God forbid I have to sweat each day to detoxify my body. You know, there's this list of things that really aren't difficult things to do, but they take determination. And I think we've lost a lot of determination in this generation.
There's no guarantee in life. I mean, we live in a world where we're all exposed to toxins beyond our control, right? And so there's no panacea or magic bullet that you just do this and you're guaranteed immortality. But we know beyond the shadow of a doubt that certain choices that we make can maximize our odds of a long and healthy life. And you can just look at the longest lived peoples in the world, like the Okinawans in Japan. These are people where up until recently, when they started eating the standard American diet, they were eating their traditional diet, which was based around sweet potatoes and whole plant foods. They had a good amount of tofu and miso, a lot of fruits and vegetables, almost entirely plant-based, some fish, a lot of exercise. This is a population where the average age was late 80s for life expectancy. And what's perhaps even more compelling is that people were healthy right to the end. And this is still true for the people eating the traditional diet over there. But when they eat our diet, they have all the diseases we get, and their life expectancy drops by 15 years. So we see right here so clearly the power of diet. And this is true with many people who they move to the United States. They have the same genetic heritage as their relatives who stay back home. And if their relatives are in Asia, where typically it's a more plant-based whole foods diet traditionally, then they start dying a lot sooner. And, you know, so it's not just genetics, and it's not just culture, it's also what you eat.
It was what he was eating that came close to ending John McMahon's life. Listen now to some of his story, and the stories of our friends Timmy Sentner and Daryl Joffrey.
Well, you know, I think it's interesting because my weight kind of crept up over time. You know, I played with a band of great guys, and even though in high school I wasn't a big drinker, you know, we had some friends and we had some parties and things like that. The best part about that was I was always the host. I was always the host of the party, and I had some pretty strict rules. You know, we lived right around the corner from the high school, and I'd have big parties. But at midnight, you were either spending the night or you were going home. But I didn't drink during those days. I watched my friends drink and that behavior. So partially nutritionally, I think I just didn't care. You know, when you're young, you make decisions, and I like to eat quite a bit. But it really started creeping up when I started drinking tons of beer. And when I say tons of beer, I tell people this, and they're like, "There's no way that's possible." But I literally drank 12 to 15 beers a night, every night, and more when we went to play gigs. And, you know, it got to the point where I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, wow, I need to do something. I need to do something to get in shape. And, you know, over the course of time, even tried several different methodologies of trying to lose weight. But it really just sort of crept up to the point, and I was like, wow, I need to do something. I need to get some kind of control over it.
I was 312 pounds. I had... I'll tell you the numbers first, then I'll tell you emotionally what it was like. 312 pounds, I had been as heavy as 357 pounds, but before I started this journey, I was 312. My triglycerides were 880. For those of you that don't know, for metric or for the US, 880 is about 8 times, 800% more than what they should be. I mean, high triglycerides are 200, 300, mine were 880. They had been as high as 2,170. Okay, my blood was literally just pure fat because I just ate junk food. I just ate out. I just ate fast food and pizza and chocolate and chips, and that's all I ate.
Well, Darryl, I'm sure you weren't born fully formed as a health advisor, health guru to celebrities and an ultra marathoner. So tell me a bit about your own background, upbringing, and kind of health journey.
Yeah, sure. I definitely wasn't that person. In fact, quite the contrary. Looking back, I didn't know at the time, but I had a strong, heavy addiction to sugar. I mean, it was so bad. I always tell people, take the person you know who has the worst addiction to sugar, times that by 1,000, and that was me. I mean, I was drinking 3 Coca-Colas a day, boxes of cereal, sugar-laden cereal. But at the time, that was kind of normal, Looking back now, growing up in high school and college, I played college soccer, and it never really got in the way of my performance. But I know now that looking back, it definitely did. So lo and behold, I was pre-law in college, and then had a bad injury in soccer, and I went to a chiropractor. And the chiropractor amazed me because, one, he didn't put anything into my body, he didn't take anything out of my body. All he did was remove the interference to the way that my body was functioning. And it was amazing. Within a couple of days, I was back on the pitch playing. And this is when 7 different doctors told me I would never play soccer again. So it blew my mind away. And it really opened my eyes to that there are other things out there than medicine. And growing up, if I would get sick, I was given an antibiotic over and over and over. I had lots of yeast in my body because of the chronic, antibiotic overuse. And, it wasn't my parents' fault. They were just doing what the doctors told them to do, which most doctors do these days, which is overprescribing, when in fact 90% of it was probably viral in nature, not even bacteria. And looking back now, when people have issues, we approach this a much different way. I always say now the only time you should use an antibiotic is if you're going to die, crisis care. So anyway, long story short, I graduated college. Well, going back to the injury with soccer, I had a very bad injury, and my parents took me to a chiropractor. And at that time, I was actually pre-law in college, and I decided I wanted to be pre-med. Not really knowing much about the profession, but I knew that this is something I wanted to do. I wanted to help other people like the way that I was helped. So I went to chiropractic college, 4 years of that, graduated, and then started my own practice. So I came here to Manhattan. I worked for another doctor for 3 years, and then I started my own private practice here on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
How did it make you feel? Did you look at yourself in the mirror and realize how big you are? And tell me how big you were. Did you feel shame? Did you feel you dropped the ball? How did you actually feel?
I've never really been a depressive person. And the most interesting thing is, even though I have some before and after pictures that are incredibly dramatic now, you'd be surprised at how much I actually weighed. At my highest weight, I stepped on a scale and weighed 252 pounds, but I carried it well. That's the most interesting thing. If I told somebody how much I actually weighed, they would shake their head in disbelief. I mean, that you couldn't possibly weigh that, but I did. It was amazing.
I think the most amazing thing about kind of my health history was, at the time I thought I was doing all the right things for my health. I was taking supplements, I was exercise, but I had a hidden skeleton in the closet, my addiction to sugar. So I was going out adjusting a patient, and then I go back into the room and I eat a caramel bar or a chocolate bar. And in my book, Get Off Your Acid, I call myself the shoemaker with no shoes, because I was literally a walking contradiction. And I didn't think that I was really overweight, but I was actually 50 pounds heavier than I am today. My willpower was so strong that I would adjust 50, 60 people a day, and I get through the day, but I was wiped out. I had no energy. I get up, I do it all over again. And I knew that there was something off. There was something wrong with my body.
So what was that like to live like that? Well, it was a life of this cycle of up and down. And it was a cycle of numbing out, because that food, especially when you get to be a diabetic, and can literally numb you out. If here in the US, we have this Thanksgiving feast every year, and everybody talks about that post-Thanksgiving, you fall asleep, whatever celebration that we have, and we eat a lot of food. Well, that's what it was like every day. I would numb myself out to the feelings of anxiety and guilt and shame. And it was the cycle then of and then looking just forward to the next meal, and you'd eat, and you get a little shot of stimulation, but it doesn't last long, 10, 15 minutes. And then boom, all of the anxiety hits again, and then you just want to numb out, and you just eat more, and you go fall asleep, and you isolate. You're filled with guilt and shame about your situation, and everything in life becomes one I then all. When I get this place in my career, when I get this next project done, I'll hire a personal trainer, or I'll start to learn how to cook better, or I'll take care of my health, and health always got put on the back burner. And so living like that created a downward spiral for me that lasted 10 years of just numbing myself out emotionally, and I ended up completely isolated.
Another factor in not being able to lose weight is partially technology. So I work for myself, all right? And I have done that for a long, long time. So I'm working on the computer, writing and doing whatever. The advent of, I know this sounds insane, the advent of being able to order things online that they just bring to you was not helpful. I mean, pizza 3 times a week, and, different pizza here. We're going to do the Chinese food and have them bring it over here. And it was just mindless eating, not really considering what I might be doing to my body, because I was, trying to work all the time. So it was a number of different factors that sort of just kept pushing my scale up. And, even though I had the occasional win, it's still, that behavior was a pattern. It was a pattern of behavior, and it wasn't something that I was paying enough attention to.
I heard you say to someone that there were times when you felt like putting a bullet in your head. Were you speaking figuratively, or did you really mean you felt like that?
No, actually, literally. There were two instances. One was kind of when I was at my low before doing the documentary. I was at a really low point in my life, and I finally gave up trying to solve the problem by myself, because I was taught, or I'd learned, or for wherever it came from, I thought you had to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And that means you show no weakness, you don't ask for help, you figure out your own stuff, and you just gut it out, And I hit a point in my life where that didn't work. It couldn't work anymore. And I couldn't handle the anxiety of where I thought I should be and who I thought I should be, and where I was. The cognitive dissonance of that made me just want to just say, what's the point? I should remove myself from the gene pool, because I have no value. I have nothing to contribute. I am worthless. So that's the cesspool of guilt and shame, and I had this sense enough, because there seemed to always be a little piece in me that was just fighting to get out. And I'll tell you an analogy a little bit later of what that was. But in the case of wanting to take my own life, I that broke through, and it just said, ask for help, ask for help. And in that moment, I reached out and I called somebody and I asked for help. And that it turned it around for me. And in about 30 minutes, they completely unwrapped all of that stuff that I had bound myself up with for the last 10 years. And they got to the core and the essence of it. And then began an up and down journey back from the depths of diabetes and obesity in 2014.
Well, I looked at my practice and I said, okay, there's 5% of the population that are uber healthy. These people that have amazing energy, glowing skin. They feel incredible all the time. They're working out. So I said, what is it that these people are doing that we're not doing, that the other 95% of the population wasn't doing, the other 95% of my practice? And these are the people who were sick and tired, people that, when they would get sick, it would take them weeks to recover, as opposed to a couple sniffles here and there. So I started to become an investigator, and I had to really figure out what was it that was, preventing my body from functioning at its best, from healing myself the way that I knew it needed to. And it was the sugar addiction. And I tried for, many times over to beat the sugar addiction, but it was literally so strong. My willpower would get me 1 week, it would get me a few months. And you look at sugar, it's actually 9 times more powerful of an addictive substance than cocaine is. When you look at laboratory rats, they actually injected rats with cocaine, and they got them addicted. And then they gave those same rats sugary beverages, and 94% of the rats chose the sugary beverage. So it's a highly addictive substance, and that's why so many people crave this stuff. So for me, I realized that deprivation wasn't the way to work. It never works. And with my clients now, I have that same approach. It's not a deprivation-based mindset. So as I started to follow the evidence led me to acid, to inflammation. I realized that my body had become so acidic, so inflamed from the sugar, that I had a massive depletion of minerals. So what I did was I just kind of changed the way I approached it. Instead of the deprivation approach, I started with the add approach. And I just took a green juice, which is high in minerals, and I started drinking that every single day. And then I took a rebounder, which is like a mini trampoline, and I just started bouncing for 10 or 12 minutes. And it was incredible. Within a few days, my energy had changed. I had started dropping weight. And in about 3 or 4 months, I had dropped 50 pounds. And the only difference was I added 2 green juices a day, and I was jumping on a rebounder. So I was detoxifying my body, but also giving my body the minerals that I was heavily deficient in. So the bell went off. I was like, okay, why are people really sick? It comes down to 2 things and 2 things only. People are toxic and they're deficient, and it's a combination of the 2. I always use the analogy, if the plant gets sick, right, what do most people think? Give it water. What will most doctors say? Drugs or surgery, right? But we got to get back to the common sense. Give that plant water, give it sunlight, give it nutrition. Maybe there's some toxins from the gas station next door that are leaking into the soil. And as sure as that plant is not too far gone, all right, the plant has the ability to heal itself, and we're no different. So that was my approach, and here I am. Got 18 years later, and my life is different.
I'm still not sure I get why. What was it that changed? Why this point? Why this time in your life, this time in your obesity? What was it? Was there something else you can add to explain why that particular point, and that it really was a turning point? Not a false hope, not a false turning point. It was a real turning point in your life.
Well, it was a real turning point. It was the first time I had asked for help. And on this journey, I'll tell you, there is a lot. It's not for lack of knowing that so many people out there, they know, most people know what to do, and they know that we live in a world of processed food and unhealthy environment, and et cetera, et cetera. But the disconnection that I had from other people, the isolation where you think we're connected. We got cell phones, we got Facebook, we got social media. We're connected like we are never before, but we're not connected with our hearts and in a quiet presence. We're really seeing each other, right? And that like sitting around the table after dinner kind of connection, That's what was missing. And when I reconnected, and when that got unpacked for me, a light went on. And there's this missing component. It's not just nutrition. It's not just movement, exercise. It's connection. And I got to the bottom of that on one of my last interviews of the documentary with Dr. Dean Ornish on October 12. And I tried to get him to talk about all of the technical brilliance and expert information that he had to talk about lifestyle diseases. And all he wanted to talk about, he kept steering the conversation back to connection and love and support. And that was the difference.
So it's definitely been a process, and there was certainly a catalyst at one point when we really started down this particular part of my journey. My son, who his name's Thomas, and he's 16, and about a year ago, probably a year and 2 months, he came to me and said, "Dad, I feel fat, and I want to do something about it." And I was like, "Okay." And as a parent, I looked at it from the perspective of, this gives me a bonding opportunity for one thing. And if I can equip him with the knowledge to be able to do something, then he'll take that with him for the rest of his life. Even if things got out of control and he gained more weight than he wanted to at some point again, I felt relatively confident that I was going to be able to equip him. And he's lost about 40 pounds. And he's also shot up another 1.5 inches. But and those two things together have completely changed the way he looks. Like his before and after, I actually shared online, and people were like, "That's unbelievable." And the same with me. The most likes I've ever gotten on Facebook were when I went, "This is what it did look like, and this is what I now look like." And it wasn't a magical process, but it's a magical result.
I was really looking forward to meeting Dr. Ben Johnson, a medical doctor, a naturopathic doctor, an osteopath, They're just a few of his qualifications. He's also a really nice guy, and invited me to his home on Lookout Mountain outside Chattanooga.
What we want to do is control blood sugar spikes. So that's called sugar. And let's define sugar, because sugar is not what you think it is. So sugar is sugar, of course. Sugar is corn syrup. Sugar is potatoes. That includes potato chips. And that's corn. That includes corn chips. Yes, I just hate it because I love them, but just can't do them. Grains, so wheat, that's bread. Fresh baked French, oh yes, with butter on it. Oh, but you want to stop sugar and you want to stop inflammation. We'll talk about inflammation in a second. So grains, I don't care what kind of grain it is, and that includes quinoa. So, but we need to be scientific about this. So you should probably get yourself a blood sugar monitor, a blood glucose tester. You can buy these at any pharmacy. At least in America, I would think the UK and Europe, you can probably still buy them over the counter. So you get one of those, you check your blood, and then you eat your bowl of oatmeal or quinoa or your 2 slices of bread or whatever it is you want to test, your corn chips, and then set the timer for 30 minutes and check your blood sugar again. So inflammation is the process of aging, is the process of degeneration. So let's think of inflammation as a fire. We've got a fireplace here, and I love to sit in the evening with a glass of wine. Can I say that? 1 glass. I've got to be honest here. And watch the fire flicker. Now, the fire is great. In the fireplace, we need fire. We've got to have some inflammation in our body to repair things. You get a cut, the process of healing is the process of inflammation. So we've got to have some inflammation. We want a fire, we want it in the fireplace. The fire gets out in the room, pretty soon the drapes catch on fire, pretty soon the floor's on fire, pretty soon the roof's on fire, and you burn the house down. So that's the process of inflammation. You want a little bit controlled. You don't want it out in the house. It will burn your house down. This is my house. So you don't want to burn the house down, and that's what inflammation out of control will do. So we want to stop putting the inflammatories in our body. So we've already talked about the same things that cause sugar spikes, grains, and starches are the same things that cause inflammation, plus you got to throw dairy in there. And so if I'm going to do cheese, it's going to be manchego or feta from goat or sheep, because they don't have the casein in them that the bovine does. That's so inflammatory. And then, I never quite know whether it's the milk and the cheese or what we do to it, because pasteurization damages the proteins. Now we've got heat shock proteins in the foods that we're eating, and those are horrifying free radical damaging things. So now we've got pasteurization and homogenization. We've taken the fats from a natural form and put them in a very unnatural state. So I don't know that it's dairy, but I know that the finished product as it's sold is not a healthy thing for us because of the processes that I suspect that if it was still delivered fresh to the doorstep with the cream on top every morning, that it would probably be okay, as long as the cows weren't fed bovine production or, growth hormone steroids and, So we need to get back to natural things. So getting grains, sugar spikes out of our life and starches, and then getting the inflammatories out of our life will go a huge way toward not letting the fire get out of the fireplace.
Bu enerjinin geldiği asıl kaynak.
The interesting part is that the real source of our energy, it's coming fully from the sun. In a sense, we're all chasing light. Without the sun, you can't have anything that's alive. The light of the sun, what we call photons, is received by plants. They use it through photosynthesis. So the plant absorbs carbon dioxide to create its energy and get water. And when we eat the plants, we're getting everything we need. So in a sense, we're taking the energy of the sun back into us. And so being alive is a transfer of light. That's why it's so good to eat a plant-based diet. It's what's natural. And if you eat meat, you have to focus on what is natural, so free-range animals, organic, etc. It's these nutrients that our mitochondria use to provide the power of our cells. Natural food will give us the greatest concentration of nutrients. If we're going to eat processed foods, or if we overcook our food, this is really bad because we kill whatever is natural inside and the process is disrupted. So eating plants with the structured water inside them and the sunlight is the best in terms of energy. Another crucial thing is not to eat too fast. How many times are you chewing your food? You need to chew it sufficiently to absorb the nutrients. Coming to the pancreas, you need to generate a lot of enzymes for digestion. If you're not chewing sufficiently, that means a lot more work to be done. We're talking about insulin and sugar. People with diabetes, if you tell them chew sufficiently, do you think they can improve their health? We should try to chew more than 20 times, and this will make an impact. If you stop eating for a longer period of time, intermittent fasting, especially during the winter, the fats from the body are producing energy by being converted to water, structured water. So when the camels walk in the desert, they're using that kind of water. So when you don't eat anything, it's hydrating the body, especially when you don't eat anything at night. If we were living in an ideal world, we wouldn't need to talk about supplements. But this is not how we live. If we were like earlier humans, living free in nature, we wouldn't have a house at all. We're like pets inside a house, not living in our natural habitat. So the habitat we're living in is wrong. What we eat is wrong. Our lifestyle is wrong. That's why we need to take supplements to support ourselves. We need good fats from seeds, fish, avocado, etc. And perhaps need to supplement with omega-3. We need antioxidants from plants, which we can eat raw, but you can add vitamin C. Many people are deficient in vitamin D, especially in northern countries. Their sources of vitamin D is the sun, so light is a vitamin, daylight is a vitamin, and superficial light is something else. People always want a quick fix. If people want a good weight, to balance their glucose level, there are many things we can say. Number one, you're not going to eat anything in the evening. If you can fast, you can fix many health problems. After 5, one can stop getting sunlight and stop eating. And by 11, when you have the highest level of melatonin, you can sleep. Even if you don't eat as well as you should during the day, as long as you don't eat a meal at night, you won't gain weight. In order to regenerate, you have to fast. You have to avoid eating anything. So actually, once you stop getting sunlight, you should stop eating.
Where does somebody really start on this journey? How does somebody look towards the prospect of a happy and healthy old age?
Well, there's a sort of simple level, which is it's what you put in your body and what you put in your mind that counts. But I've really studied the difference between healthy people and unhealthy people. We have on my website a questionnaire, 100,000 people have done it. So I've really looked closely at those who score high on health scores. And there are 5 essential processes. One is blood sugar. So sugar is key. Stabilizing your blood sugar, becoming a master of your blood sugar control, that's one. Another is oxidation, antioxidants. You know, we make exhaust fumes when we burn foods. If you smoke, if you live in a polluted city, if you eat a lot of fried food and you don't have fruit and veg, all the multicolored stuff. So that's the second, you know, increase the antioxidants. And by the way, if you stand on the earth, you know, with bare feet or you sit on a rock, that is antioxidants because the earth receives free power, free electrons, 50,000 lightning strikes a day approximately. So you actually discharge your oxidants by being on the earth. It's interesting. The third is water, terribly important. We are 2/3 water, hydration. The fourth is fats. I call it lipidation, but it's both the omegas, like omega-3, fish, seeds, and so on, and vitamin D. Again, we do not get enough vitamin D, so sunlight is really good for you. And the fifth is something called methylation, which is absolutely key to the aging process, and it's to do with B vitamins. A lot of people later in life are not absorbing enough vitamin B12. Most vitamins, like vitamin C, vitamin A, we absorb very well. The body knows what to do. But B12, when you get older, if you start to lose your stomach acid production, which is actually what happens, you don't absorb B12. And then you can't do methylation. And there are 1 billion methylation reactions every 2 seconds in the brain and body. When you talk about epigenetics, genes, how you turn them on, how you turn them off, that's done by methylation. So we know that methylation is key, for example, for Alzheimer's protection. That is a preventable disease. National Institute of Health in America attribute 22% of the cause of the risk for Alzheimer's to having a raised homocysteine level, which is the blood test for methylation, lack of B vitamins, and 22% to a lack of seafood or a lack of omegas. Just those two. Dealing with those two will cut your risk by at least 1/3.
This is the era that we're learning about nutrition and toxicity and hormones and sleep and exercise and relaxation. All these modalities our parents and grandparents didn't know about. They didn't have to, because if they grew up on the farm, it was happening automatically. Nowadays, you have to create the farm experience. You have to go out and exercise. You have to take enough vitamin D. You have to eat the whole foods, the fresh foods. And all of these things cost money. They take time. And oftentimes, you're still somewhat ridiculed for the fact that you're a health nut. Though, I think the trend is people are realizing that if they don't do it for themselves, their doctor's not going to do it for them. The government's not going to do it for them. Institutions as a whole are not working. So people are realizing maybe I better take charge of my health myself right now.
We know we have to eat. We know we have to drink water. We know we have to go to work. We know we have to pay taxes. There's things we have to do. And yet they let their health go under this weird idea that some doctor, some health service, some insurance plan, and some pill is going to save their bacon at the last minute. And it's just not going to work like that.
I think that people should really understand that when it comes to the regenerative capacity of their cells, it doesn't matter what tissue. They could be looking at their skin, maybe they have some fatty liver. There are those stem cells within those different tissue types. And when given the proper ingredients, which are just usually wholesome organic food and really good quality water, and when the toxicants that are in our food and our water are removed from those tissues, the stem cells are able to regenerate. And that's when you can see a profound difference in biological age. One of the most classic examples is when they gave Italian women a directive to stop smoking. They tracked them for 9 months, and within that 9-month period, their biological age regressed 13 years. They showed the skin before and after, and it was just amazing to see that really we're often just getting in the way of the regeneration. Get the chemical cosmetics out, get clean air into your house, stop the habits that we know are harming us, and you'll see that your body will come back, you'll look younger, you'll feel radiant, and ultimately it'll end up causing you to live much longer.
I mean, the big driver of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and most Western diseases is a loss of blood sugar control. Basically, we do run on sugar, and if you have fast-releasing refined white bread, white pasta, white cereal, etc., even a lot of fruit and raisins and grape juice, whatever, your body can't cope. It's just not designed to have that much, blood sugar. So we can measure how much a food raises your blood sugar, which is called the glycemic index. And that's, if you like, the quality of the food. And then there's the quantity, which is how much you eat. So if you multiply the quantity, i.e. is it 1, 2, or 3 pieces of bread, by the quality, is it brown or white, you get the glycemic load. So that determines what's going to hit your bloodstream. And if you eat protein with carbs, so you have some nuts with your fruit, for example, or you eat some fish protein, with some rice carbs, that sort of lessens the blood sugar load. So maintaining a low glycemic load is fantastic. And we have people who are losing, 7 kilos every month, but never feeling hungry, because it's blood sugar highs that cause fat gain and blood sugar lows that make you hungry. So becoming a master of your blood sugar control means more energy, less hunger, no cravings, and no weight gain.
The likelihood of you living long is directly related to the amount of carbohydrates you burn as fuel versus fat. So the more fat you burn, because fat is a clean burning fuel, especially when you're in something called nutritional ketosis and you're creating ketones, water-soluble fat molecules, which can readily penetrate the cellular and mitochondrial membranes to burn as energy to create ATP. So the key is to switch that, because I would say, well, even though 5% of our fuel stores are stored as carbs, 95% is fat, it's the reverse. 95% of people are using carbs as their fuel, and only 5% are using fat as their primary fuel, or far less than that most likely. So the key is to help re-educate your body to remember to learn how to burn fat as its primary fuel.
We have been on carb-rich diets now for about 50 or 60 years. Obesity has gone through the roof, cancer's gone through the roof, heart disease, stroke, the whole thing. And now fat's back. We've got a situation, we've got a very valuable tool for dealing with insulin resistance, systemic inflammation, because fat is an energy source. Cells love fat. And by introducing beneficial fats into the body, things like olives, avocados, coconut oil, seeds, nuts, fish oils, these types of things, the body is able to get a fuel source going into cells rather than carbs. Carbs come with all of the attendant problems with insulin, insulin overload, what we call the insulin roller coaster. I lived for about 8 years in Los Angeles, and part of that was right opposite Winchell's Donut Store. And every morning at 7:15, 8 LAPD squad cars would turn up outside it, and out of these vehicles would come the most enormous police officers, and of course they're all after the donuts, the Twinkies, Ding Dongs, and Bear Claws, and they come out with a gallon jug of this coffee sweetened with Irish cream, and then they would be in their car and just feeding themselves like feral animals. I had my binoculars, I could see what was going on. But this has been the situation for decades, and then people wonder why they end up with cancer and stroke and heart problems.
Essentially, fat is there to be used as a fuel. One of the reasons that we build up fat beneath our skin, adipose fat, is to have a storage system for energy that we can burn. And of course it's no good just building up and building up your fat reserves and never burning it. So in order to burn fat, we need to use a system that we call beta oxidation, whereby we start breaking down fat. We start mobilizing it, breaking it down, and taking the energy from the breakdown of the fat and putting it into the Krebs cycle that mitochondria, the little organelles that exist particularly in our muscle cells, but really in all the cells of our body, use to produce energy. And that system, for many people, because they're so reliant on carbohydrates, has gone to sleep. So there is, intermittent fasting is actually one of the mechanisms, a combination of intermittent fasting and calorie restriction, which are both terms that really just are about eating less and less often, because that's how we have evolved to eat, allows the system to start working again. And that generally should be done in association with a much more active lifestyle. So if you add sedentary lifestyles into the equation, it's very difficult to start burning fat if you're going to be sitting, eating TV dinners in front of the television.
We must remember that if you look at the historical perspective to these diseases, which are likely to end your dreams of longevity, heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, of course, now. These diseases were pretty much unknown 175 years ago, if you were trawling the medical journals of, say, the 1830s. They came in out of left field in a big way once refined sugar and refined flour was available to the general public in the Western industrialized cultures for the first time, post 1860, 1870. Then we start seeing these problems coming up. So I would say one of the chief problems you've got working against you and your longevity is going to be this whole thing of carbs, excess insulin resistance, They're now calling, many doctors are referring to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes, which is insulin resistance of the brain. And many watching this will know that when you start introducing beneficial fats like coconut oil, that can jumpstart the whole system and start to pull people out of these systems. Why? Because those cells were starving because of insulin resistance. What you've now done through coconut oil or sesame oil or fish oils or anything like that, you're introducing the fuel source the cells can use to jumpstart themselves and begin to reproduce again. So the whole insulin thing is very interesting, and bringing fat back into the diet, I think, is going to absolutely transform people's health.
Is it fair to ask you to give me some example of the kind of physical things that you did to help along the way and the kind of nutritional things that you've done along the way, just to give people an idea of how you've been changing things?
Absolutely. So I tried to, of all the experts that I interviewed, what I ended up finding out from my perspective was that I needed to get rid of the diabetes, the insulin resistance first. That's a terrible condition to have, because it just wreaks havoc from your body, from the tip of your head to the bottom of your shoes. I mean, from amputation to blindness to Alzheimer's to heart attack to kidney disease. I mean, it just wipes you out. It's the underlying cause of death for all the top causes of death, let alone already being in the top 10 of its own. So what I did first is I first realized that I had food addiction. I interviewed Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson. She educated me on food addiction. I never even knew that was even possible. I was a 10 on her scale of susceptibility of 1 to 10. But and so I knew I had to make radical decisions. I couldn't just make an intermediary decision. And so I chose the most conservative or the most aggressive path to reverse my disease, and that was with some of the doctors that I'd interviewed that were they were plant-based, salt, oil, and sugar-free, and that's where I was headed: whole food, plant-based diet. And I tried and tried and tried, and I kept getting sucked back in and feeling more guilt and more shame back into fast food or pizza or chocolate or chips or, whatever it was, hamburgers. And then I also, interviewed, psychologists, and Dr. Doug Lisle helped a lot unpack the challenge that we face in our modern environment, from our own genetic drive to want to find the richest food in the environment and eat as much of it as possible. So, and he took the guilt and the shame away by saying, look, it's not your fault. You're actually doing exactly what you're designed to do in this environment. And doing that, some people, depending on their genes, might not show it on the outside. They have the genes that don't, but it's eating away at the inside. Some people show it on the outside. You do too. But it's okay. You're not broken. And to hear that I wasn't broken, gave me back the hope that I have control. But there I was, making the smart thing now to ask for help. So I was learning that, man, you got to educate yourself. You got to ask for help. And so I decided to do the whole food plant-based diet, salt, oil, and sugar-free. I wanted also to do fasting, pure water-only fasting, to reset my gut microbiome and do neural readaptation of my taste buds. Because right now they're used to being overstimulated with salt, oil, and sugar and fat and all that. So I tried to do it on my own, and I couldn't. I tried for like 2 or 3 weeks. I couldn't get through one day, and I kept cheating, and I thought, what is wrong with me? And finally I decided I'm going to go to a medically supervised water-only fasting clinic. So I went to the top one in the world, that's True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, from the doctors that I had interviewed there, and I said, check me in, I cannot solve this problem. The day I checked in, I went to Omelette Express in Santa Rosa, and I had Eggs Benedict, hash browns, coffee, toast, and biscuits, and I just ate like crazy. And I went right from that breakfast to the clinic and checked in. So that was December 18 of last year. So how you saw me at my worst in the documentary was still the way I looked this last December 18. And I ended up I was going to shoot for a 10-day water fast. And then I was 10 or 12. And then I thought, well, may as well do 2 more days. I'll have 2 weeks, 14. I hit 14. I thought, let me try 21. So I did 21. I thought, I'll do another week. So I ended up doing a 32-day medically supervised, water-only fast. And then I stayed at the clinic because they have a chef and a cafeteria there, and I ate clean, whole food, plant-based, balanced meals, salt, oil, sugar-free for another month. Okay? After a week of refeeding, the refeeding was just like the first 3 days after the 32 days was vegetable broth and squash, okay, a little bit of squash for 3 more days. And then another 3 days, a little bit more, another 3 days. So like 10 more days after the 30 days of water only, I was still only having very gentle food. So after 42 days, 41 days, 9 days of refeeding, I was back in the cafeteria eating whatever I wanted to eat. But now I'm filling my plate with, salads and greens and beans and onions and mushrooms and all the stuff that like Dr. Furman talks about with his G-bombs and great food from the chefs. And so I felt great, and my craving levels were like where they were of 8, 9, 10, they're like a 1 or a 2, and then I also got connection with a lot of other people there, and that's where I learned the connection piece. I would socialize with people on the same journey, with the same path, that want the same thing out of their life. And that was the path that started it.
For the record, the way that I've lost this weight, and I've lost approximately 90 pounds, which I say it out loud, and my brain in the back of my head still doesn't really process that. But occasionally I pass a mirror now, and I'm like, wow, I don't even okay. I've passed a mirror and gone, wait, who is that? In a way that shocked me. But so we're ketogenic, all right. And why did I choose keto? Well, for one thing, I understood the mechanics behind this particular diet. A ketogenic diet is high fat, but let me discuss that in just a second. High fat, moderate protein, and very low carbs. All right. And it made sense to me. The science behind it, and there's some proven science behind it. This diet has actually been around since the late 1920s and was developed for kids with epilepsy, because they didn't want to give kids the adult medication that they had for epilepsy. They weren't sure how that would work. So they developed this diet, and for some reason it worked. There's some very interesting published studies that in my research, I mentioned to you before, you guys know I'm a marketing copywriter, but I have to do an inordinate amount of research to make sure that the facts that I'm presenting are actually facts and studies to back things up, and not pseudoscience. The interesting thing is, there's so many other schools of thought that work for other people. This is one thing I want to harp on, because in a lot of my dealings in the natural health industry with experts, you'll find these combating ideas, like if this works, then this can't possibly work. And what I found is, that's not really true. I mean, that's not, I've met people who have taken a completely vegan approach, which is fantastic, vegan vegetarian approach, and have altered their lives in much the same way. And there's solid science behind that as well. An 80% plant-based diet is something. One misconception that I want to talk about is surrounding keto and fat. All right. Everyone thinks I eat sticks of butter somehow. Sticks of butter on steak. And while I will admit to having a bacon affinity, it's not really, that's not how we do it. We indulge in that every once in a while because, we have a relatively high protein. So a nice steak with a little compound butter on top, why not? But for the most part, we eat a lot of nuts. We eat a lot of avocados. We eat a lot of olive oil, things that have fats that are actually good for you. I mean, I stay away from anything that's a trans fat or anything so there's a common misconception. And I think that is a part of where the people who don't like keto, and there are also certain claims that they make that I won't write in my writings because I can't find enough research to substantiate, that necessarily ketogenic eating is a cure for anything. All right. Now, I will say it's done this for me. All right. And I'm grateful for that. Will I be on this for the rest of my life? I don't know, because as human beings, I believe that all of us have different nutrient requirements. So my suggestion for anyone who wants to undertake improving their health in any way is take a good stock of what you're doing right now. So the first step to me is being conscious of what you're doing. So my beer drinking, for example, Thomas said he's like, he's in, all right, I'm in, we're going to go keto. And I was like, okay, great. And I had a beer left in the fridge that day, and I didn't drink it. And it sat there for months and months and months and months. And I just stopped. I literally cut out 12, 15 beers a day, sometimes more, in a day. And I was done. Because I always looked at my drinking as a conscious decision, and I wanted to continue to start making better conscious decisions. So if you're out there and you're seeing this interview in particular, first take stock, find out where you are, and try to identify the behaviors that you're doing, and then be conscious of them. I'm not even suggesting that you have to go cold turkey and change everything immediately. Just start being conscious of what you're doing.
Sugar's the answer. I mean, if you look at the modern acid diet or the standard American diet, it's made of sugar and grains and excess protein. Those three things are literally contaminating the body. I mean, if you look at diabetes, it's becoming an epidemic. In the last 50 years, there's been a 700% increase in diabetes. 25 million Americans have it. 80 million have pre-diabetes, and that number is growing at epidemic proportions. And when you really break it down, it comes down to the excess sugar in the body, right? Because sugar, which I dub as the most acidic chemical you could put into your body, sparks something in the body called insulin. Insulin is what I call the traffic cop for all other hormones in the body. When insulin goes up, you store fat, and then there's a knock-on effect to your cortisol, leptin, ghrelin. So you start to basically have all these other effects into the body. When your cortisol goes up, what happens? Your immune system shuts down. Your digestive system shuts down. You start to develop things like insulin sensitivity, leptin and ghrelin sensitivity. Why are leptin and ghrelin so important? Those are our hunger and satiety hormones. So when you get resistant with those hormones, basically your body's sense is now off. The brain thinks, I'm always hungry and I'm never full. So what happens? It becomes a vicious cycle over and over and over. So these people find themselves eating more and more, but what foods are they eating? Foods that are high in sugar, carbohydrates, all right? And grains spike your insulin just as much as sugar does, right? And a lot of people aren't aware is that the average American consumes 5 times the amount of protein that they should. And when your protein intake goes more than 15% of your daily caloric intake, guess what happens? It turns to sugar via your liver pathway. So what happens? The cycle all over again. Insulin goes up, and then the vicious cycle happens. So it's really a sugar problem.
Creating plates of food that are full of color, consuming all 6 major phytonutrient color groups, so greens, reds, yellows, blue, black, purples, white, tan, all the colors of the rainbow. A lot of people are consuming food plates that are largely sort of yellow or tan, and they just don't have the diversity within it.
If you get a vegetable or a fruit even, and it has that color all the way through, it's going to be that much more of a nutrient-dense food. So in other words, an apple is not going to be nearly as nutritious as, say, a nectarine. You know, you've got that color all the way through. The colors tell you the story of what the phytonutrients are in there. Go get yourself some purple potatoes. Purple potatoes have phytonutrients in there that regular potatoes don't have. They have a little bit more fiber, so it offsets some of the carb load that you get and sugar impact that you get from potatoes. When I do a plate, for example, I always think about, okay, so I'm going to have a yellow or orange vegetable here, lots of greens there, and there's my protein, and then some, you know, maybe even the sweet potato or whatever, and that will also accomplish the carbohydrate and the fiber.
We're not going plant-based. We kill well over 10 billion animals a year, and that's larger animals. It doesn't even count the little ones. If we cut our meat intake in half, we'd save 5 billion animal lives, but mostly we'd have healthier people. Happier animals, but we'd have healthier people. This is true. We know that plant-based diet is the best all-around diet. It's going to have more fiber, it won't overload you with protein, and most importantly, you're avoiding junk food.
Ultimately, my primary advocacy for those who want to live longer and experience, you know, really high quality life is to exclude from their lives the best as possible non-natural substances. It's pretty standard and basic, actually. Vitamins, for example, if they're natural, I think that we need to get a really, you know, basic daily dose through our food primarily, if not food concentrates, and then if not, there's, you know, isolates that are still going to help us, and exclude chemicals that we start to actually glorify as some type of life-saving intervention.
So the ideal diet is one centered around whole plant foods. That's fruits, vegetables, legumes, which are beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds, mushrooms, herbs, and spices, basically real food that grows out of the ground. These are our healthiest choices, while at the same time trying to minimize our intake of meat, eggs, dairy, and junk food.
Plant-based diet will save your heart. It'll save every part of you. It'll make you look better, you'll have more energy, you'll have fewer diseases, you won't have all kinds of problems that we take for granted.
You obtain a taste for this. And after a little while of getting rid of all the junk food that you used to eat, you'll realize it didn't really taste all that good. A lot of what I was tasting was the chemicals that were in it that are put in the food to keep me addicted to it. So it's really, it ends up being a choice. Is your life important enough to make decisions and to make choices that might not be all that easy at first, but they'll pay long-term dividends?
When we shift our mindset from what's easy and most pleasing to what's going to give me the best strength, energy, and vitality, we start making different decisions. We start looking at food and water differently, and we start looking for things and noticing reactions that our body has when we're consuming foods.
A lot of parents have a notion that, you know, if they're not going to eat what's in front of them, they don't train their children how to eat and how to appreciate green beans and spinach and all the good things that we want them to eat. And instead, and manufacturers, food manufacturers are guilty, restaurants are guilty, we dumb down children's food and we give them things like chicken nuggets and French fries because we don't want to bother to teach them how to eat.
There isn't a perfect diet. And the perfect diet for you or for me or for someone else depends on us. It depends on your age, your level of health, your sex, your genetics, your history, what you want to accomplish in this world, the season that it is, who are you? What are your preferences? So all that can wrap up to determine what might be right for you. If we're searching for perfection, perfect house, perfect partner, we never really get there. So it's understanding that also one could take a nugget of wisdom from any diet. So you might be a vegan, but if you were a flexible vegan, you might be able to understand that there's a wisdom to meat eating. It's, in fact, any vegan that's alive on planet Earth has gotten here because they have a long history of meat eaters in their diet. In their lineage. So We've all evolved in this very fascinating soup. So it's understanding that every nutritional system that I've ever seen, I can pull usefulness out of it.
In upstate New York, Erin Nielsen is a therapist who likes to simplify things as much as possible for her clients. She spent years struggling with her weight, skin issues, and constant exhaustion. She tried diets and workout programs with no success, but now in her 40s, she believes she's found the answer with a combination of nutrition and exercise. And she reckons most of us have the potential to look and feel 10 years younger.
There's so much confusing information about food out there. And so I like to keep it really simple. And I just talk about the 4 Ps. So the first 2 Ps are just try to remember to eat protein and produce. So a lean protein, and produce is vegetables or fruit. And I'm a really big advocate of leafy green vegetables. Those are really wonderful. And the fruits that I really advocate the most are lower sugar fruits like berries, because they're full of antioxidants and they're lower in sugar as well. And then the other 2 Ps I talk about are actually what to avoid, and that's packaged and processed food like I just mentioned. So if you can do that, it really makes a huge difference in your body, and it helps reduce inflammation. And I think more and more people are understanding this, that inflammation is the cornerstone of all disease. It really is. So if you can reduce inflammation in your body, you're going to feel better within a few days. That's what I think. When you ask people to change their eating habits like that, it can be really difficult at first, but within a few days, they start to see improvements, and that keeps them going because it's not something that takes long. Your body can really adapt relatively quickly. So that's the nourish portion of the Nourish, Move, Love. And then the move portion, pretty self-explanatory, but I like going a little farther and saying healing movement. So in addition to physical therapy, I really am an advocate of shorter, intense exercise. So short bouts of exercise, not much longer than 30 minutes. And the reason I really advocate for that is if you exercise too long at a really high intensity, it can produce chronic inflammation in your body, which is negative. Now, if you work out for short periods of time at a high intensity, it produces what we call acute inflammation, and that's really beneficial for our body. It's because inflammation is there for a reason. It actually can help our bodies grow and get stronger if it's in the right amount. So a lot of what I used to do and why I was not feeling well was I used to work out for hours thinking that's what I needed to do. And I kind of say I was punishing. It was like a punishing workout. And so not only is that punishing your body because it's causing that inflammation that's chronic, it's also can be very depressing because you don't really feel well after. And there's a reason for that because it's not good for you. So it's just like that roller coaster that stems and causes a lot of dysfunction in the body. So that's my move portion. And then the love portion, there's a couple of things under that. The biggest one is just having a mindset, a positive mindset. And there's a lot of things I like to do for that, but one of the biggest ones that has helped me is gratitude, like practicing daily gratitude. And I have another kind of number thing that I remember for this because I like to keep things easy. And so I have 4 numbers that I remember and I try to do every day. And they are 10, 5, 3, and 1. So the 10 is just trying to get at least 10 minutes of exercise. And it can be anything. Some of my people that I coach are just doing walking, which is great. Some are doing high intensity workouts for 10 minutes. Some are rebounding, like we talked about a little bit before, and just anything that will get you moving. Because everybody's going to be at different fitness levels, and that's okay. But 10 minutes of movement. And then the 5 stands for 5 minutes of prayer or meditation. So whatever your beliefs are, it's just very grounding for the day. And I usually recommend doing this in the morning because I think it starts the day off really beautifully. And then the number 3 is that gratitude portion I mentioned. And I really encourage people to write 3 things down every day that they're grateful for. So for a long time, I used to just think of them. But now writing them down has made such a difference. And I really encourage people and myself to have them be different every day, which can sometimes be hard, because it's easy to just write down the three same things every day. And then what's really fun too, as you do this for many years, looking back at what you write down, it's so amazing to just kind of look at the different stages of your life and how things change. And it's fun. And then the number 1 portion is just doing 1 act of random kindness a day. That has changed my life tremendously. And I always tell people, you can do more than 1, but at least 1 act of random kindness a day. So what I used to do when I was working in an office is I would just leave a little note on someone's desk, like, oh, I like your shirt today, or whatever it is, or leave someone a coffee, or just give someone a compliment. And it really it's really hard to feel negative when you're doing these things every day, right? Because I've gone through a lot of times that are really rough, and most people have. And even through those really rough times, if you can find something to be grateful for and try to give to others during that time, it's really hard to be negative.
Every time you go to the store, you have access to thousands of products that taste good that will kill you, right? Every time you drive down to the store, you pass fast food restaurants that have food that tastes great to most people, okay? But it will kill you, right? So there's this conflict of, am I disciplined enough to make the proper choices in my exercise, in my nutritional regimen, my dietary regimen, to make decisions that I know will help me to live a long life? Do I apply this knowledge and become wise enough to detoxify my body so my organs work better, so that I can live a long life? Or do I just give in to do what's easy and fulfills my taste buds right now?
Understanding what really makes our bodies tick has advanced dramatically, even in the couple of years since we made that vitamin movie. At the level of our cells and our genes, we're learning things that can have a direct impact on healthy aging. I love that expression you have, real health. Why has medical science not developed a simple test where I could walk in and I would be analysed for all the nutrients I need and my deficiencies or overabundance or whatever, but it encouraged me that seemed to be the direction you were going in.
Yes, and that is the definition of the Reardon Clinic as Dr. Reardon envisioned it. We do a panel that we call the Real Health Panel, which looks at all the amino acids, fatty acids, B vitamins, antioxidants, red blood cell minerals, food sensitivities, hormone levels, all the things that are real causes of normal cellular functioning. We're looking for deficiency states. That initially was all we were looking for, is that if the reference range was low, the nutrient level was low, we would just try to replace it. Now, thanks to genetic testing and nutrigenomics, we are now seeing that certain nutrients do certain things at the molecular level and that some people need more than others. The MTHFR enzyme affects 85% of the American population, not to the same degree. My wife has a 75% reduction in that particular gene and enzyme functioning. So we have to be very cautious to make sure she gets methylfolate and other B vitamins. So it's not just a matter of just doing a kind of a shotgun measurement. Now we're beginning to be more strategic in our measurements. And so instead of doing a very expensive real health panel, I'm really recommending that a methylation panel, which looks at about 10 of the core nutrients that are necessary for maintaining methylation at an optimal level, that may be sufficient for 85% of the population.
For most of us, it is really the pattern of our genes and the variations to individual genes, what we call polymorphisms or single nucleotide polymorphisms, that are very key. Now we're beginning to understand that there are particular patterns of these polymorphisms that exist together. And the more we understand about those patterns, the more we understand that many of them can be modified by changes in our behavior, particularly linked to the way we eat, what we eat, how we move, how physically active we are. So by understanding these patterns, we can actually start to modify our gene expression, because essentially our health status at any point in time is linked very much to not what genes we have, but actually how we express those genes. So it's a little bit as if the genes are, if you like, the loading of the gun, and when you have a particular environment, they actually pull the trigger. So you have to get that combination spot on.
We are measuring key nutrient levels. We are looking at genetic mutations. We're looking at all kinds of different people from different parts of the world with different genetic heritages. And we're hoping that the ability to take large amounts of data and have it processed by a supercomputer like Watson will help us individualize more precisely than we ever have before exactly what your nutrient formula is, so you don't have to take as much supplementation, because people do get pill fatigue. That's another kind of fatigue that I run into. So just taking tons and tons of vitamins may not be the answer, but learning how genetic factors enter in and relate to diet, exercise, blood pressure, fatty acid levels, antioxidant levels, all these things put into the supercomputer and then have it give you your particular recipe formula. That to me is a very powerful dream too.
You staggered me when you talked about there being a method by which one can look at my potential, your potential for longevity. I'd never heard of this before.
Yes, what happens is we're making new cells all the time. I mean, this is the big myth. People think we're like a car and we need petrol, we need oil. We're not. We are regenerating all the time. I mean, our skin is new in 22 days. Our bones are new in 6 weeks. And that means that you can actually radically change your body. But what happens is, to make a new cell, you have to copy the instructions, which is the DNA, which you might have seen those spirals. That is the chromosome that holds all the DNA. So you have to copy it. And at the end of the chromosome are these two strands. They're called telomeres, and they're a bit like the hard bit on the end of your shoelace. Every time you copy a new cell, the telomere gets 1 degree shorter. And eventually, when you run out of telomere length, you die, because you can't make new cells. Game is over. So there's a lot of research on this. In fact, a lady just won a Nobel Prize for looking at what is associated with longer telomeres and shorter telomeres. And the answer to that question is that the more stress, shorter the telomeres; the more exercise, the longer. Meditators have longer telomeres. The higher your omega-3, think fish, longer the telomeres. Higher your vitamin D, longer telomeres. Higher B12, folate, B vitamins. The lower the homocysteine, that's the blood test for methylation. Supplement takers have longer telomeres. So I mean, when I saw all this, I thought, this is great, I must get the test. Because it's basically a graph. And if your telomeres are long, I mean, young people have long telomeres and gradually they reduce, that's the way it goes. So I had mine tested. I'm just about to turn 60, and I have the average telomere length of 28. So as long as I'm not bumped off by big pharma, I could be around for a while.
Quality of life and the changes to have a good quality of life into an older age, that starts now. That the changes that are going to happen, that are going to affect me in 20, 30 years, are dependent upon what I'm doing in my life right now. And that's the hardest message to communicate to people, that what you are doing today is setting you up for 30, 40 years down the road.
I think that the bottom line, if you want to live a healthy life, is sex, no drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, the people who live longest are happy, positive people. They have good social life. They enjoy life. They're active. It's the rock and roll, dance, enjoy your life. And not get hooked into a whole lot of pharmaceutical drugs, because they're really, a path to nowhere. You just take more and more, and then you end up with more for the side effects. Definitely optimizing nutrition. So you have a good, positive outlook on life. You keep fit and you eat well. Those, I think, are the 3 keys to surfing the silver tsunami.
Perhaps the final words in this episode should come from John McMahon. His dramatic health turnaround is charted in his series I Thrive. But that turnaround didn't come until he reached out for help. We hope this episode and this series will encourage you to do the same. Now, I don't know you well enough to know this, but I just kind of sense from a couple of things you said that maybe in your previous business life, you were acquisitive, you really went for it. Business and success meant a lot to you. And you were maybe selfish, you maybe didn't think about other people, but I've heard you talk now, and you talk in the film, if you can save one child from going through what you have gone through. But you seem to be a much more caring individual through whatever has happened. And you feel more for others and you want to do more for others.
You're very perceptive to have picked that up, because that's exactly right. I came from the corporate world. My degree's in computer science, telecommunications. I worked managing the Sprint network for a long time in operations, and went out and did some really big startups, was at the top of my game, and hit the internet boom. And my ego needed to be checked. It was all about self and greed. I wasn't the best person in the world, and I feel like, to make a biblical reference, that in order for me to do my life's mission now, I had to be sent out into the wilderness like Moses, 40 years. I did my 40 years in the wilderness in 10, but that's what happened. I needed a beat down, and for my true essence to emerge.
And you've big plans still to look forward to in the near future?
To serve. Transformation is my life's work now. my transformation for myself, and then to encourage and nurture and foster transformation in other people, and to begin that path through their health by clearing their mind, making their body clean, and then so that the reintegration can take place. I kind of tell a story about the rest of the story about Humpty Dumpty. So everybody knows the story. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a big fall, all the king's horses, and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. That's where it ends. Well, walking on that beach, I had this huge insight into there's a total unspoken, that whole story is pointing to the rest of the story that I'd never heard anybody talk about. It just kind of bubbled up. And it was like, there's a principle there. No, all the king's horses and all the king's men, everything in your outside world can't fix you. There's nothing that can put you back together again when the world has broken you down into pieces. And there you lay, all in pieces. You have to make the start. You have to make the first step forward. It's not to say you have to do it alone in the extreme, what I thought. But I in that moment is when I reconnected to my heart. And I realized you just have to pick that one piece up and put it in so that you can, it's like your walkie-talkie, so that you can talk to other hearts and ask for help. Hey, and then the reintegration of your life, and then you can shape it in any way that you want. So that's kind of the rest of the story on Humpty Dumpty from my perspective.
So, welcome back. That was episode 2 on nutrition. 2 really interesting stories in there. First of all, my good friend Timmy, and secondly, John McMahon. And John has an amazing story. I mean, the whole I Thrive production, the whole series, and especially his own personal transformation, I actually found fascinating and ridiculous what that man's achieved.
Amazing. It's amazing to me. And one of the things is, I hope that in this episode you've seen some things that make you take pause, that opened your eyes to the possibilities of several different methodologies, several different ways that you can implement nutrition in your life. Now, I want to remind you that at the end of this series, we're being completely transparent here. At the end of the series, these series, documentary series that I've worked on, they're long. These episodes are long. It's an hour or so, and we've made a big ask of your time. So if for some reason you want to go back and see it, we're going to make several packages available in addition to the Accelerator program, so that you can have actionable steps that you take in your life to be able to implement the things that we've been sharing with you.
And that's crucial, because we genuinely don't just want you to consume this. We want it to transform you. We want the result of this series to be you taking the 21-day challenge and really getting a new pathway for your life. That's what this is about for us.
I did it. And as I said in my interview, I tried a number of different things before I found what works for me. Yeah. And what we want to do is really equip you with the tools to be able to do that. That's our stated mission, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, episode 3.
Episode 3. Now, interesting, because as you actually said to me last night when we were discussing this, type 3 diabetes.
Type 3 diabetes. There's a school of thought and a number of doctors that have started using the term type 3 diabetes in describing Alzheimer's disease. And it's an interesting link, and it's something that people need to pay very close attention to because of the level of diabetes. Type 2 is on the rise, and if those two things are as directly connected as some of these doctors think, it's something you need to pay very close attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. So next episode is on Alzheimer's and dementia. So please join us, 24 hours.